Thank you and welcome back. So, hope everybody is safe and staying positive. As I was just telling, this is a very challenging time, but very soon this will go away and we will see the sunlight. Let's pray for that.
Yes.
And I'm sure it will happen because the system will always try to reach its stability, as Krishna talks later in the Gita. Like whenever there is a disturbance in the system itself is designed with a lot of intelligence so that it will come back. And I'm sure some vaccination will come out. And this immediately the social distancing that was in place for the last 2-3 weeks, right now I believe that people are taking it very seriously. So the rate we are seeing is the result of what happened a couple of weeks back. So hopefully it will stabilize. So I honestly believe that these numbers were the real numbers even weeks back. Right now, more testing is revealing more fact. That's another reason. So let's be positive and let's continue the study of Gita. So the study we have undertaken, one major topic, which was from verse 11 to verse 25. Krishna was trying to explain the fact that when the body get destroyed, your existence is not coming to an end. So to explain that point, he tried to highlight the three major aspect or three dimensions of a living being, jiva. One is the body, second one is the soul, and the third one is the atma. So the body has a beginning and an end at the time of the birth and the death. Whereas the subtle body, which takes another body, that's what we saw in the previous class, vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya. Just like a person changes a cloth, the subtle body takes a new body at the time of the death. Whereas the Atma, there is no change. So since it is clear that the complete existence of you is not coming to an end at the time of the death, Krishna is saying that there is no point to get depressed. So today we are going to conclude this topic. Mainly the key topic from verse 11 to 25 was the nature of Atma. What we call it as Atma Surupam, the nature of the Atma. So we saw a few characteristics on the nature of the Atma. So the Atma is Nityaha. We saw that. It is eternal. Eternal means it is never born and it is never going to cease to exist. That is the key, Nityaha. Or in other words, it is not time bound. Then Satyaha. We saw that our Atma's existence is not dependent upon something else. Everything else existence is dependent upon something else. Whereas the Atma or the absolute reality, it exists by itself. So that is Atma Satyaha. We saw several examples. Like we said, the pot exists, but the existence of pot is depending upon something called clay. Like that, the universe exists, everybody exists, but the existence is depending upon some x quantity, and that x quantity we called it as Atma. And the third thing is Atma is Sarvagataha. It is all pervading, like it is there everywhere in the universe. There is not a single place the Atma is not there. Then Atma Ekaha. There is only one Atma for every being in the universe. Then Atma Aprameyaha. It is not comprehensible using the usual means of perception. Then Atma Akarta Abhoktaha. It's not an agent of the action. It is not a subject of the action. And finally, Atma Nirvikalpaha. Even though when we say that it is eternal, what happens? A living being will make changes during its lifetime. Like it will grow, it will decay, all these will happen. And that type of changes are not there in the Atma. So one point here to just think about. Last week I saw one more example, right? So like imagine there are 100 buckets and there is a sun shining, and the first bucket, every bucket has some water. What is going to happen? The reflection of the sun in that water. This was the example we talked. And we said like the bucket is considered as the physical body. The water is considered as the subtle body or the soul. Whereas the sun is considered as the Atma. So there are 100 buckets, 100 reflection of the sun. And imagine the first bucket has a muddy water. So what you can see an unclear sun. And the second bucket, the sun means the water was just dancing or disturbed. So you see a dancing sun. Was the sun dancing? Absolutely not. How many suns are there? There is only one sun. And the sun is pervaded everywhere. If you add a new bucket and a water, the reflection of the sun is going to happen. And we talked about the rebirth also, little bit. To answer a question, we talked about the rebirth. So the idea of rebirth is what? Let's say that you have one bucket is getting broken. What you can do is you can transfer that water from one bucket to the other. So with respect to the body, the bucket is ended, but the water has moved from one bucket to the other. When the water is moved to the other bucket, what is going to happen? The body is ended, and you can say that a new sun is born. But in fact, it is not a new sun. The sun was there already. So this is the characteristics of the Atma. We have been talking. So this is good. And Krishna just going to recap all these things in the next 3 verses. And he is going to sum up this. So let's go to verse 23. Again, this verse is going to highlight the indestructible Atma.
Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapah, na soshayati marutaha.
Beautiful. This is a wonderful verse. So Krishna is going to say that Atma is indestructible. So he tells, Nainam chintanti shastrani. Nainam means na enam. Enam means this. Na means not this. So he has been talking about the Atma so far. In this particular example, he is talking about that sun. Not about the bucket, not about the water. So this Atma, which is the true essence of all of us, which is the real existence in all of us, he tells this Atma is not chindanti, meaning it is cut by shastrani, by any weapons. So na enam chintanti shastrani. Atma cannot be pierced or Atma cannot be cut by any weapons. Then the second verse he tells, Nainam dahati pavakaha. This Atma, na enam. Enam means again this. Na means not this. This is not burned. Dahati means burned by pavakaha. Pavaka means fire. So this is not burned by fire. The third thing, na enam, na chainam keledayantyapaha. Again, na cha enam. Even this is not dried. Kleda means dried by the apaha. Meaning, kleda means wet. This is not get wet by the waters. Apaha means water. And one more thing he is telling. Na shoshayati marutaha. This is not dried up by the wind. So what Krishna is trying to say that every object in the universe is subjected to destruction. So if you take one model in the prevailing, means at that particular point of time was, as I said, like the way you compose something is depending upon the worldview at that point of time. At that point of time, one of the prevailing worldview was this Panchabhuta model. Like there are 5 elements that constitute the entire universe. Right now we know that it is not 5, it is 100 plus. But at that point of time, one of the model used to describe the universe was this 5 elemental model. And every element out of the 5, 4 element represents the different states of matter. Like earth used to represent the solid state, then the water used to represent the liquid state, the air used to represent the gaseous state, and the fire used to represent the plasma state where the particles are a little bit more far apart, and finally space used to represent the lack of everything else. So this was a model that was prevalent at that point of time. And here Krishna is using each of these element, like the 4 out of 5, because the 5th one is the lack of everything else. So solid means weapons. Any weapons can typically destroy. You can cut an object down. Like if you cut my head down, I'm dead. So that means it's not applicable to Atma. You may cut down the body, but nothing happens to Atma. You may cut down the bucket, but nothing is going to happen to the sun. Then second thing is what? Fire. Fire typically can burn any object, but not Atma. You can burn the bucket, Atma, nothing will happen. Then water can wet it. Everything else, water can wet it, but not Atma. Because if you soak something in water, eventually it gets eroded. That is another means of natural destruction. And then means wind can dry, dehydrate it, and eventually it can get destroyed. So the usual natural means of destruction is not applicable to Atma. So this is a recap or conclusion of the previous verses, that Atma is Nityaha. So there are 4 sentences in this verse. The first one is Shastrani na. So it tells like Chintanti this. Shastrani na Chintanti enam. So enam means Atma. The weapons do not cut this. The fire do not burn this. Water does not drown this or wet it or soak it. The wind cannot dry it. So this is the nature of the Atma. Another illustration. So just to bring home the idea that even though the Atma is intimately associated with the body, even though the reflection of that sun is intimately associated with that bucket and the water, the Atma is not getting destroyed by anything. Even if you destroy that bucket and even if you throw that water away, the physical body and subtle body will come to an end, but nothing will happen to Atma. So the Atma is not subjected to destruction by any means and not even change, because the change happening is on the body, not on the Atma. So the Atma cannot be destroyed by any non-means of destruction, weapons, water, fire or air. Even if you take any other means, any corona or any virus, nothing. It's only the body get destroyed. So this is the summary. This absolute, what is described as absolute, is beyond any possible effects caused by the events within the creation in a high level. So anything happens in the creation, the universe may come to an end, but nothing will happen to Atma. This is the summary of this verse. Nothing new. So far, whatever we saw, it's just recapped. The next verse is also a recap. Next 2 verses also recap. Any questions?
So, Rajaji, all these attributes of the Atma, are they more or less applicable to the subtle body also?
Not exactly, because first of all, Atma do not have an attribute. It's only a characteristics, right? Because if you say that there is an attribute, that itself is a limitation. When I say that Atma is 100 feet height, that's an attribute. But that implies something. It's not 101. So Atma do not have any attributes. Every attributes are born out of Atma. To answer your question, I got your question. The question is subtle body. The subtle body has limitations. Of course, the subtle body is born as, again, I cannot prove it or disprove it. As per the Shastras or as per the scriptures, The subtle body is born at the time of Prabhava or the Srishti. When the universe got manifested, the subtle body comes in. And the subtle body moves from one state to the other. And the state of the subtle body changes when you go from one body to the other, little bit. For example, the state of the subtle body is determined by the current prarabdha karma. And what exactly is the current prarabdha karma will be determined at the time of the death of the previous state. If you remember the discussion we had on last week. So every time the subtle body changes. The subtle body evolves or transforms and it takes accordingly the required body. Again, this is a matter of belief. I'm going to talk about the doctrine on karma because since most of you are very much interested, I got a lot of questions also offline. Next week we'll do a whiteboarding session on the doctrine of karma in detail. I'm going to take from the science point of view first about the cause and result and the concept of hidden variable. Those who studied machine learning, you may remember the role of a feature in the final output. So we are starting from that angle and we are going to understand what exactly is this law of karma, because it is one of the most misinterpreted law. So we are going to talk about that, probably even in the next class. So we'll do that. Any other question? Otherwise, we'll continue.
अच्छेद्योऽयमदाह्योऽयम् अक्लेद्यो शोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतस्थाणुः अचलोऽयं सनातनः.
Beautiful. So again, a recap of what we said earlier. One of the characteristics of the recap, Gita, is you see a lot of times recap and repetition, which is to drive home this concept into our mind, because we are not talking about the typical understanding what we have. It is a little bit away from our typical experience. So that's why it is being repeated. So let's say achedyoyam adahyuyam. So it's earlier we said weapons cannot cut it, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, and fire cannot burn it. So he tells that it is achedyaha. It cannot be cut. You cannot cut that into two. So think of this. Even space. Space, if you really think, again, space is not Atma, but space, if you think, how can you cut the space into two? Can you cut the space into two?
No.
Why?
Because space is everywhere.
Exactly. When something is everywhere, you cannot cut it. Because if you want to cut that into two, right, you have to have some place where it is not.
Yeah.
So that is the reason. Imagine, these are all pointers for contemplation or meditation. When you think about the Vedantic meditation, expansion meditation, when you think about the absolute reality or the God, think about this. Means you have to be guided with a script. We will do that later when we can go back to our center. But imagine like something which is subtler than space. So even space exists in that. Even space, you cannot cut it. So that is why achedyaha. Then adahyaha. Dahana yogya is our body. That is why we call it as deha. So Atma is achedyoyam adahyoyam. It is not dahana yogya. If you cannot burn it. Burn means what happens? When you burn, it will transform into a new object. Here there is no change possible. So it is impossible. Then akledyaha. Kledyaha means wet. Akledyaha means it cannot be wet at all. Wet means it is a means of erosion over a period of time. Then achedyo ashoshyaha. Ashoshyaha means what? Shoshya means it can be like wet, or ashoshya means it cannot be wet. Evacha. This is the Atma's case. Then what is with that conclusion? He is concluding that therefore Atma is nityaha. It is eternal. Sarvagataha, all pervading. Sthano, unchanging, unchanging. There is no movement for Atma. Then achalaha, stable. Sorry, sthano means yeah, there is no means change. Achalaha means it's not moving at all. Stable, sthano means it is stable. Achalaha means non-moving. Sanatanaha means ancient, most ancient, but ever fresh. So let's see. So his narration on the immutable nature of the Atma or the self is reputed, because this is to put this into our mind. So it cannot be cut by weapons, it cannot be wet by water, it cannot be burned by fire, it cannot be dried by wind. So therefore, Atma is Nityaha, eternal, means not bound by time. Not bound by time, it's a big term. Everything you can think in the universe is bound by time. Even the universe itself. A few billion years ago, this was not there. And a few billion years, I don't know, like after some period of time, it won't be there. Sarva Gataha means all pervading, like it's everywhere, it is there. That which exists everywhere. By the way, that which exists everywhere, we call in our Puranic literature with a name. Anybody remembering that?
Sarvavyapi?
Vishnu. Sarvavyapi is correct, but Vishnu. Vishnu means Vyapana, Vyapaneti iti Vishnu. That which perverts everywhere is what is being called as Vishnu. So it's a symbolic representation. You have this one person with 4 legs and blue color and all these things. But in fact, it is a pointer that is pointing to this Atma. Sarvagataha, that is Vishnu. Vyapaneti iti Vishnu, the second name in the Vishnu Sahasranama. Then Sthanu means stable. Stable means changeless. And Lord Shiva, in the Shiva Sahasranama, is known as Sthanunatha, the Lord of the most stable one. I'm just showing that Vishnu and Shiva is same. So Sthanunatha, some people name was there. In South India, what happened was this Sthanunatha, as Sthanu has changed to Thanu later point of time. So you might have heard somebody like Thanu Pilla, etc. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, such names was there. So there was a freedom fighter or a politician called Pattam Thanu Pilla in Kerala. You remember, Rajesh? You heard of his name?
Yeah, heard of it.
Yeah, the name comes from this root. Sthanu. Sthanu means stable. So technically Sthanu means if there is a tree, the root, it's a firm, it is rooted firmly on the ground. So just to negate that, because sometimes the root is stable, but the branches may move. Just to negate that, he said achaloyam, non-moving. Do you think that space move from one place to the other?
Because it's everywhere.
No,
Yeah.
There's no space, that space isn't there.
Yeah. So how can you move? So
Yeah.
Arnab can move from North Brunswick to South Brunswick. Why? Because in a place S1, in a time T1, Arnab is there. That implies that in a place S2, at the same time T1, Arnab is not there.
Yes.
So that is why there is a possibility for Arnab to move from S1 to S2.
Yeah.
Arnab cannot move from S1 to S1. So if something is all pervading, can you move? So this is the nature of Atma. So you look at the quantum physics. So you see the definition of field and all. You will see the same type of definition. So that's why the scientists got aesthetic when they heard these type of verses from a scripture that comes 5,000 years back. Even how can somebody think about this much bigger dimension at that point of time? It's a miracle to the entire scientific community. So, okay, so that's the Nityaha Sarvagataha Sthanuhu Achaloyam Sanatanaha. Okay. Okay, I forgot to tell you, you all may have the OneDrive link which have all these presentations. So I have all the presentation including this and the last week's one and the previous week's one except verses 12 to 14. I just had to clean up that little bit, but everything else is up to date. You can go and download it. Rajesh, if you don't mind, if you could just put that link also once again, the OneDrive link, that would be great.
Sure, yeah.
So the nature of the Atma is summary. The absolute is described as something as beyond any possibles of effect caused by the events in the creation. So no natural means of destruction can affect Atma. It is eternal, it is all-pervading, it is stable, it is motionless and most ancient, but ever fresh. Have you heard some of the other people, other religious people? This is not to criticize any other religion, but just to make sure that when somebody criticizes you, it doesn't have any meaning. I often used to hear like, you don't have any history. Your God doesn't have any history. Really speaking, if the God has a history, is that a plus or a minus? History means, right? It is a problem.
Yeah, because you only have it such for so.
Yeah.
If it's a fixed.
History means there was a time that
Yeah,
God wasn't there.
yeah. So even their own definition of God is different. These are ignorant people from every tradition, because if you really look at the book of John, you will see, if you read the book of John, first 17 verses, you will see like exact same thing. So they say like, in the beginning there was God, Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So that type of higher spirituality is there in every tradition. But even if it is there, people have to understand. So some ignorant people will say that you don't have a history. So that means your theory is wrong. So if God has a history, mind you, that's a problem. It should be beyond history. So these are some of the things even our kids find it difficult to digest, because the moment I was explaining, means one kid only asked me, like, we don't have a history. I said, like, do you think what is history means? Then there was a beginning when the God was born. They said, is that a plus or a minus? And finally the kid herself has to say that. Yeah, that's a problem. So these things we need to make them understand. It is not to criticize anybody, but you have to understand that God is not somebody to be afraid of. A lot of people think that they say that as a credit that I'm a God-fearing person. Vedanta tell, never ever accept that. We say God is something that needs to be feared or worshipped blindly. The God needs to be understood. Right? So have you ever heard Krishna saying that, believe me? He said, I'm teaching you. Understand it. That's a big difference with Vedanta and other approaches. So let's go to the next verse.
Avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmadevam viditvainam nanushocitum arhasi.
So this is the final verse that conclude that particular topic of discussion, which is the nature of the Atma, Atma Surupam. Beautiful again. So it tells Avyaktoyam Achintyoyam Avikaryoyam Uchyate. Uchyate means it is said that, again it is said that the Atma is continuing the description of the nature of the Atma, because the last verse said it is Nityaha Sarvagataha Sthanuhu Achalaha Sanatanaha. Sorry, I forgot to mention the final word called Sanatana. What is Sanatana? The Hinduism is known as Sanatana-Dharma. That is the real name of Hinduism. What does that mean, Sanatana? It is the most ancient, eternal, but it's fresh. That's the definition of Sanatana. If something is extremely ancient, Purana also it means like that. Pura iti, pura eva nava iti. So if something is very old and if it is not useful right now, That is not Purana. Okay. So, avyaktaha achintya, avyaktoyam achintyoyam. Avyaktaha means what? It is unmanifest. See, you may see bucket, you may see the reflection of the sun, but most of the people really fail to see the reality that gives existence to the object. So the Atma is unmanifest. It is not directly perceivable by your usual means of perception. That's why when some of you ask me to explain more about Atma, it means any teacher will struggle on that. Even if the teacher, means I haven't experienced it, but even if the teacher is experienced, it is very difficult for him to explain that with words. So even Einstein explained this, not about the God, but even if you go to the relativity, right? So when you see this twin paradox and all, how do you conceive it? So you're trying to explain something which is beyond space and time, sitting within space and time. How is it possible? One more example. So, what is the life of an amoeba? Maybe a day?
Days.
Yeah, days, right? And there are certain subatomic particles whose lifespan is seconds. So, such subatomic particle or these amoeba, if it tries to contemplate our life, what would be its? Can it even conceive what is happening with us? That's our state.
We have such a long time to live then, I guess, right?
Yeah, infinite, right? Seconds considering to the human. So even it is impossible for it to understand the change and modification in a human system, because by that time it will be over. So that's how we try to understand the God. But luckily we have a means of knowledge to know him. That is the scriptures, any scriptures. So avyaktaha achintyaha. Achintyaha means it is not an object of contemplation. Because like inference. First one means it is not an object of direct perception. It is not an object of inference. So in our Vedanta, they typically call three means of perception or means of knowledge is there. One is pratyaksha, which is the direct perception. Another one is inference. Classic example is, the stock example in Vedanta is, there is a smoke. So implies that all the scientific discoveries like that. All the scientific discoveries. How did we found that the sun's temperature is this much? Has anybody gone to sun? It's all inference. So Atma cannot be inferred by anybody because it is beyond inference. So the usual means of perception and inference is incapable of knowing Atma. Then avikaryaha. Vikara means change. Avikara means non-change, not changeable. So then avikaryoyam uchyate. Uchyate means it is said that. So therefore, so he has been discussing from verse 11 to until this. How did he started the verse 11 if you remember? Ashocyan annashocastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase gatasun agatasumscha na anushocanti pandidaha. If you are a pandita, pandita means Atma Vishaye Buddhi, the one who knows Atma is called Pandita. So if you are a Pandita, you won't be getting depressed because of anything. When somebody dies or when something happens to the body, you won't get depressed. Anushocanti, not Shochanti. Anushocanti. Constantly monitoring, mourning and getting depressed. Of course, any departure is a cause of pain and it is legitimate. But don't get depressed because just because his physical body came to an end, that is not an end of his existence. The true existence in you is Atma, and that Atma is not subjected to any change. So he tells tasmad, meaning therefore. Look at the style again. Krishna didn't say that Atma is permanent, believe it. So he gave a lot of arguments. And tasmad evam vidhitvainam, having known this, na anushochitum arhasi. Shochitum means mourning or grief. Anushochita means extreme sorrow. That is illegitimate. Understand that. So this concludes a major topic. So there are 4 sentences. First sentence is, I am uchyate avyaktaha. This Atma is said to be unmanifest. This Atma is said to be not subject of contemplation or inference. This Atma is said to be not subjected to change. Therefore, having known this in this manner, having known your true nature in this manner, there is no need to have this depression. So that is what the title, the theme of this verse is. Therefore, do not get depressed. So this concludes the topic of the discussion, Atma on Atma, Atma Swarupam. So just winding up, saying that it is not an object of the usual means of perception, does not have any attribute, it is not conceivable or think as an object. Therefore, the avyakta achintya Atma, which is aprameya. Aprameya means it is avyakta plus achintya. Aprameya means it is not a means of your knowledge, because it is not an object of your direct perception, it is not an object of your inference. So having known this truth, don't get depressed. And this is why he started with Gatasu nagata sumscha na anushojanti pandidaha. So it started with the second chapter, verse 11 to 25. This marks the end of one key topic in the second chapter. And this key topic is the nature of Atma. And it is said that this Atma is like non-changing, all-pervading reality. This is a fantastic topic, and this is a metaphysics, and which you cannot experience at this point of time. So Krishna now comes to our level. It's okay. It gives you a consolation, saying that something in me is going to survive. But my direct experience is always with my body. And this body comes to an end. So don't I have to be sorrow? That is be the natural question all of you have. So let's go to the second topic of the second chapter, which is the argument from a lower level. So far the argument was from a very high level. So now let's think about the body, because if you really look at Rajesh, I was born sometimes back and I will be gone sometime later. So between that time I exist. So if you think your existence only as the body, that means like human beings are getting born, you see every day a lot of birth and you see a lot of death. And now I don't have to tell. Yesterday, every 7 minutes, one person was dying in New York. What a terrible situation. So if you think that as the reality of an individual, then what should be your attitude? In other words, whatever we said so far, if that is not your experience, if that is not my real experience, what should be my attitude? So the topic changes. The beauty of the second chapter of the Gita is it covers so many topics. Typically a chapter of Gita talks about 1 or 2 topics, but the second chapter, being the summary of the entire Gita, is going to talk about that. But before that, let me pause and just recap. So the first 10 verses of the Gita showed or pictured or painted the fundamental human problem. The fundamental human problem is not that you had an issue with coronavirus today, or X has a financial problem, or Y has a medical issue, or somebody has an emotional issue. That's not the problem we are solving here. But the problem is that Krishna clearly tells that these type of challenges, as long as you are living in this world, there won't be a tomorrow without any challenges. Something or the other will be there. And each of these is good enough to create a trigger in you which can generate a sorrow. So each one of us have a risk. And if you remember, I very clearly defined what is risk. I've already explained what is a risk, issue, and uncertainty. What is a risk? The definition of a risk is known unknown. Right? Known unknown is risk. It is not yet happened, but there is a probability that it happens. So why do you take car insurance? If something happens, you have to have a mitigation. Right? That's the insurance is a means of mitigation for some risk. So like that, we all have a big risk. Even for our kids, when they go to the world, we think that they're going to a perfect world. But that's not the case. And you may prepare them to face a few challenges. And our parents also prepared us to face a few challenges. But the challenges we are facing now, even they could not have even imagined in their dreams. Isn't it? The world is much fast-paced. So they could not. It is impossible for anybody to prepare everybody for the for the financial problem and or the health problem. And I also told you, like, each one of us are in the middle part of our life, hopefully. And if you really think about the challenges you had from your birth to now, and if you think about the challenges ahead of you, 100% the challenges ahead will be more difficult because of the very fact that you are getting aged. One day or the other day, right, you will get, means your body may not be capable of facing the world. So this risk is a problem. And anytime and every time, this can trigger something. And it can create a problem in each one of us. So how do you reprogram yourself in such a way that we are free from sufferings, not free from pain? One thing we pointed out is pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So that's why one problem was pointed out, Arjuna's problem, as a trigger to get into an unhealthy mental condition or a depressed state. So Krishna uses that and trying to educate us. Because if Krishna had to solve the Mahabharata battle, easiest thing was not to advise Gita. He could have fought the battle by himself and win the battle for Arjuna. Did Krishna do anything in the Mahabharata battle? Did he change the external situation by any means? Nothing. But he tried to teach us. Through that one person, what is advised to one person became a message for the humanity. That is the beauty of the Gita. What is spoken by Jesus to 12 people, it is guiding the whole world now. What is spoken by Buddha to a few people in the deer park is guiding the entire world. What is spoken to Muhammad by this angel, it became the life-giving message for a lot of people in the world. That's what happens when the power of that message. All the scriptures are like that. So this teaching of Krishna starts with by clearly defining who you are. Because the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita clearly talks about who you are. And the second portion is going to talk about who is God. And third portion of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the chapter 12 to 18, is going to talk about the relationship between these two. So we are covering the second chapter. So we are talking about who we are. So that's why that nature of the Atma, then the subtle body and the physical body, these three explained very well. So I really request you to think about that two example we were trying to contemplate a lot, because for me, when I was studying, this software hardware example was the light and this bucket and water. Because this bucket and water, when I was thinking, I was just trying to visualize, right? There was a red bucket. In that red bucket, there is a beautiful sun. And after some time, there was a crack in this red bucket. So we poured the water into a blue bucket. What can I say? A new small baby sun has born. But there is nothing happened to the sun. If you think about that, you'll understand the water, meaning the Atma. So now the question is, when there was no bucket and no water, was there any sun?
Yes.
That's exactly what it is, right? And what is means, so the life to manifest something is required, because the sun will be always there. If you have a bucket without water, sun is there, but you cannot see the reflection. So for you, the life to get reflected, you need the subtle body. Without the subtle body, you cannot have the manifestation of life. Even though the Atma is there always, the Atma gets manifested as a living being only when the subtle body is there. So that's why this example is very powerful. Now the question is what? If that subtle body is muddy, the sun appears to be colored, right? So is that because of the sun is colored, or is that because of the subtle body, the water is colored?
The water.
Right. So the color or the nature or the personality or the constitution of the subtle body is going to determine how the life expresses, how the Atma expresses through that body. And if the physical body, and another point you need to remember is that this physical body is a mandatory thing. Without the physical body, the subtle body cannot manifest. And without subtle body, the Atma cannot reflect. So that's why the combination of these three are inevitable for the life to manifest. So this is an important message. And then if a new bucket, if you put with a water, you don't need to create one more sun. The sun is always there. And in one bucket, you have blue sun. Another bucket, you have green sun. Another bucket, you may have a dancing sun. All because of the nature of the water. So this example is very powerful. For me, one example that helped me to drive home this concept was the hardware and software. The biggest aha moment for me when I was studying this was when I was thinking about the example of that hard disk I told you. The hard disk, which weighs 2.2 pounds, mind you, the hard disk is less than that. I put 2.2 because that is the weight of your brain. So I was thinking the difference between subtle body and physical body. So this example, so imagine you have 2 TB of hard disk, which can potentially record up to 80 hours in standard definition. That means the entire life of a person can be video recorded and copied in that hard disk. And when I copy that hard disk, is that going to make any difference in the weight of the hard disk? So that was a very, very, very striking example for me to understand what is the difference between this physical body and a subtle body. In Europe, one theologian was trying to show that there is soul. Soul, so what he did was he killed a rat, and you can Google it. He killed a rat and tried to get the weight. So the physical body and subtle body cannot be compared in the same dimension at all. So that is, you have to understand. Some agnostics also say that, what is subtle body? They do not have any problem in understanding the hardware and software, but they fail to understand this. So just these two examples very powerful, and try to understand that the soul, what is the soul, the so-called soul? So many people use soul as Atma, Definitely soul is not Atma. It is only a subtle body. And finally, mind you, Sanskrit, its power sometimes creates problem also. The power of Sanskrit is, it is context sensitive. Those who studied the automata theory, you know that, right? A language is classified as context sensitive language and sometimes context free language. Computer language Pascal is said to be a context free language. So if you see the Pascal statement, it is unambiguous. It will execute exactly as it is. Whereas C, another competing language, is completely context sensitive. So depending upon the way you put that bracket, the meaning can change completely. So this is what is called the famous problem in the compiler design called dangling else. Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
So that is what is dangling else. And even in English, there is a famous statement which tells the context sensitivity. So I told about this in the class. This is there in the artificial intelligence book written by Alan Rich. That is the book we all studied when we were in college. So Alan Rich tells, I saw a boy in a park with a telescope. Who has this telescope? That's the question. I saw a boy in a park with a telescope. The question is, who has this telescope? Can you answer?
Is it the boy or is it the observer?
Boy has the telescope or I have the telescope? If you say boy, I'll say that I saw the boy with a telescope. So if you say me, I will say that no. I saw the boy in the park.
With the telescope.
Boy had the telescope. This is called ambiguity. And this is very common in Sanskrit. So the word Atma is used to sometimes to refer the Atma, sometimes to refer the soul, sometimes to refer even the physical body, sometimes your mind. So it's context sensitive. So that's why I was trying to use a prefix whenever I use the word Atma. The prefix I used was Satchidananda Atma or Paramatma. So keep that in mind and contemplate upon these verses, the 8 or 7 characteristics of Atma. Atma Nityaha, Atma Satyaha, Atma Ekaha, Atma Sarvagataha, Atma Aprameyaha, Atma Nirvikaraha. All these things, contemplate upon that. The slides are there. Contemplate upon that. And we can start the next verse from next week, which is a brand new topic. So let me pause here. Any more questions or comments? I'm going to talk about the law of karma in detail in the next 1 or 2 classes. As I said, I'm going to explain this from a cause and very, very ordinary level to the deepest level, because understanding of this law of karma properly is very important to understand the life. So I'm going to start from the science side, because science is not going to explain the law of karma, right? So even in Western world, the word karma is there and people uses karma a lot. So what exactly is the real meaning of that? We will see.
Ashish,
Yeah.
one question. So, eternal and what is Sanatana?
Mm-hmm.
Sanatana is ancient and fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does it mean is, you meant, I'm just trying to understand. The ancient it is ancient, but still relevant
Mm-hmm.
when you say fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So some books or some idea, it might be very old, but that idea may not have any relevance even now. For example, once upon a time, it was believed that the sun is going around the earth. Does it have any significance now? It's outdated. It's no value now. Whereas this idea, which is given in the Gita, even now it's relevant. how many scientific papers, not just the psychological field, how many research is happening on these subjects even now. Like if you go to the Harvard school, like even now, for example, the relaxation response which was created by Herbert Benson, how that was created, the whole history is beautiful. So last week in our reading challenge, I suggested a book called Mind Over Medicine. If you read one of the chapter, that book gives the entire history of that relaxation response. It started with the transcendental meditation, because at certain point of time, if you keep your body certain, if you keep your mind, my body in certain state, your mind relaxation response will be triggered. So these type of mind-boggling ideas are there in the Gita. For example, the entire emotional intelligence research, people even refer to the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sixth chapter, there is one verse which is even being researched even now. So it's still relevant, and no scientist can say that this is wrong. There is nothing here which tells that the earth was created on the first day, the sun was created on the third day. Nothing you will find that. It is very, very, very scientific, and it is relevant. That is why it is called Sanatana.
Rajaji, is there any English word for Atma?
Atma. There is no proper translation. The closest one is self. But the word self has a lot of confusions. So better use the word Atma. So for example, self sometimes means it's your mind. The same complication is there. So there is no equivalent word, one word equivalent for Atma, Karma, Dharma. The most complicated word to translate into English is Dharma. There is no equivalent word. But Atma, the closest is self. That is what it is being used in all these literatures. So if you take a commentary of Gita, you will see the word self a lot. That is what is Atma. But again, means what I was expecting from our deep learning program is a traditional study is totally different. And what we are trying to do is a substitution of a traditional study. Very systematically, we are going with Shankara's commentary. Even though the language is English, the examples are modern, but it is completely rooted on a standard teaching methodology provided by the tradition. So when you follow that with modern example, your understanding will be clear, and every verse you will see the sequencing. So this is very important, that type of study. And I feel I myself very lucky to get exposed to such teachings, because 50 years back or 100 years back, if I need to learn this, we had to leave home, go to Rishikesh, stay in an ashram for 2-3 months. Right now, it's available in front of us. The very traditional teaching, thanks to technology, thanks to a lot of masters.
Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.